Oh,
You're live.
it's a healthy in person. So
Okay, guys, we are back. So sorry,
have a video. We like doing it on Facebook.
we had an awkward incident because we got so into it. I didn't realize the battery on my laptop was dying. So now we have a second stream. Again, I promise things will be a lot more smoother and more produced when we do this again next week. So, picking it back off, where it was logical because it does kind of hit the second half of our workshop where we actually practice questions on each other. So we're going to actually practice a really good question is, what do you say when someone asks, isn't this just a gimmick, right? This freedom dividend is $1,000 once. It sounds like he's just buying votes. So we're going to practice answering that question. So, are you ready, Tony?
I'm ready.
All right, I'm going to ask you a question first. So, Tony, this freedom dividend, $1,000 a month, kind of sounds like a gimmick. Is he guys just buying votes? I mean, is this real?
Well, Hexel, to be fair, all politicians have a gimmick. Free education, free healthcare, free. Or I'm electable. I'm going to be Donald Trump. Everything is a gimmick. The difference between Andrew Yang is he's actually exercising that right now. He's actually giving that to families. You see the experience happening in Stockton. But Andrew Yang came out of his own pocket to do that. I haven't seen another politician actually come out of their pocket to do that.
Awesome. That's a really good answer.
I try.
Like, you should talk like that all the time.
I will. Hey, I'm a politician here. Hey.
Yeah. So what I liked about that is it kind of broke the fourth wall and just acknowledged that like politicians promise like really gimmicky stuff all the time. But what's different about it is he's actually walking the walk and talking the talk. Um, and so yeah, that's really all I can say because that's really spot on. You guys want to add to that? How he
I thought that was really good because it also points out what he's doing right now. Like he is already offering that to a family with his own money, and then also now with the campaign, he's scaling it up. So he is actively doing it, so people know, like, yeah, it's already happening.
Yeah, I thought it was great. You kind of covered all the bases for that answer.
you guys want to try next?
Yeah, I'll try next unless Laura
I'll
wants
ask
to.
you, Kennedy.
You'll ask me?
Yeah.
Okay.
What was the question again?
In your own words, isn't the freedom dividend of $1,000 a month a gimmick?
Oh yeah, the G word. Yeah, isn't the $1,000 just a gimmick?
I think I'm pretty smart, and I don't think I would vote for someone whose entire campaign is run off of a gimmick. This isn't the first time. Like, if you've just started paying attention to Andrew after the third debates where he just offered 10 people the freedom dividend, this is not a new thing. This isn't like he's like, oh, I'm trying to make myself relevant. This is his whole campaign that he's run off of that has support from people like Martin Luther King Jr., and Milton Friedman. So there's a lot of people that this is not a gimmick to. This is a serious solution. But also, yeah, kind of Tony's point. Like every politician has their own thing, but Andrew Yang's thing has been tested and supported in a whole state like Alaska, whereas the other candidates can only point to European countries that don't have the same problems that we do in America. And so his is a tried and true method of solution, and we should give it a chance. And I think you'd be pretty dumb not to vote for someone offering you $12,000 a year.
Awesome. I think that was a great answer. So, and I love that you also invoked Martin Luther King, all the other people who have advocated this in the past, and this is not new. Does anyone else want to comment on her response?
The only thing I'm going to comment on is I think when Andrew Yang does something like that, you have to look at it. Is he spending a lot of money on like the mainstream media when it comes to advertising? That money could have gone there. I think that's a way of him saying, I'm giving this to the American people and allow them to do my advertising. That is like, that's just what it seems like he's doing.
Yeah, awesome. All right, so I'm going to give it a try. You want to ask me the question?
So, Hexel, this $1,000 a month thing, like, isn't that buying votes?
Well, here's the thing. It wasn't buying votes when Martin Luther King proposed it in 1970. It wasn't buying votes when Alaska implemented it over 40 years ago. And Thomas Paine was certainly not buying votes when he wrote about it at the founding of the country. And so, if buying votes means lifting millions of people out of poverty, if buying votes means creating 2 million new jobs, and if buying votes means actually laying out a very solid plan for paying for it and making sure the math is correct, then I don't see how buying votes by helping millions of people is such a bad thing. So yeah, maybe it is buying votes, but it's certainly buying votes in the way that it needs to be bought by making sure people can have a job, pay for their house, go to school, go to work, make sure that the basic hygiene and needs are taken care of. So, call it what you want, but it'll help millions and millions of people. So, okay, that's my answer. Because I wasn't expecting you to say, "Isn't this buying votes?" You took another wording of it, which was really interesting. Some people might call it a gimmick, or they could say buying votes. And so, yeah, what are your thoughts on my answer?
Hetzel, I love you. But I'm afraid that if someone will take that out of context and make like a soundbite out of it, where you said that it is buying votes. So that's what I would just be worried
Like a
about.
deep fake or something?
Yeah, or just
I don't know, I
taking
think
it out of
that-
context. Well, or if someone just listened to that part of what you said and they took away was like, oh, it is buying votes. I don't know. I would just be worried about that. I mean, it's not, and yeah.
I like the zinger where you were like, well, it wasn't buying votes when Martin Luther King was talking about it, or Thomas Paine. Like, that was really like, ooh, got him. Like, got him.
Heck, so if they soundbite that, that just means that you're getting to them. And if anyone wants to soundbite that, let's go. This is gonna be fun.
Yeah.
That's what we want you to soundbite that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, because I think you brought up a good point, which is one tactic that's used a lot is to essentially agree with the other person, and then reframe their own belief, if that makes sense, right? So there's a great resource on YouTube called Legal Eagle. Have you heard of that, Kennedy, on YouTube? So it's actually this YouTube channel where they dissect legal arguments in movies and TV shows. Definitely shout out to Nick. And so they did a review of the episode where Data was put on trial, where they had a court hearing to determine whether or not Data was a sentient being or property or chattel, right? And then of course, naturally, that was an analogy to black, the rights of African Americans. The process of property was naming all of these facts, like Data can bend metal that a human being can't, or Data has 1,000,000 times more knowledge than the average human being. And so you could either take the approach of A, trying to disprove the facts that the other people are presenting, or B, just own it and then reframe it, right? So it's like, yeah, Data does know a lot more than the average human being. And yeah, Data does have greater strengths. But when we see that in another person, we don't challenge that person's humanity. We say that is a great example of humanity, right? So just because certain things are true doesn't mean we can't use it for our own argument. And so in the case of buying votes, he was trying to say, isn't that buying votes? And so I just turn around and say, yeah, it's buying votes in the best way possible by lifting millions of people out of poverty. So that's kind of the angle I went for. I could refine it better, but that's kind of one approach. All right, so you guys want to try that question again, or we want to move on to another question? What do you guys want to try next?
Let's talk about minimum wage. How about minimum wage, the $15 minimum wage versus the freedom dividend? So
Okay, gotcha. Okay, so this was one we did actually our first one, but I think it's worth coming back to again because we're going to talk about the Green New Deal a lot, and a big part of the Green New Deal is the federal jobs guarantee. And then also, if you're talking to people who are proponents of the Green New Deal, chances are they're also quite progressive. And so a lot of them have spent a lot of time fighting for 15. And so it's one of those things that they're not directly connected, but if you enter into that realm, people are going to ask you about it. So,
Can we do that approach where we disagree with it? Like,
Yeah.
like what you said, because we do agree with it. It's just the execution of the job.
yeah, absolutely.
We do want to have this
Yeah, gotcha. So, so Laura just asked about like, can we take the approach where we agree in spirit, right, and motivation, but just a disagreement on the approach? So, who wants to take that question first? You want to take it? All right. All right, Tony. So this whole basic income stuff, like, why is that better than a federal minimum wage of $15 an hour? Like we've been fighting for that for so long. Why is basic income better than just paying people more?
That's a great question. So, am I listening right? That's a great question. So basically, when you look at the $15 minimum wage, you look at who can actually pay that. That's your Walmart, your McDonald's. What happens when a Walmart leaves that city? It becomes the big empty box. And what happens to those smaller businesses? Well, they're decimated and they're gone, and the Walmart's gone as well. So that $15 minimum wage is costing small businesses. I know there is this argument that you have of if you can't pay a living wage, you shouldn't start a business. I understand that. But would you pay a teenager, a 16-year-old that's starting to work $15? Have they earned it? Do they need a living wage? No, they don't. So to me, though, the $15 minimum wage kills small businesses. And if you, for a small business to thrive, guess what? They're going to cut back on employees. That's just the facts of it.
All right. Did anyone want to add comment on his response?
I thought that was really good. It was really logical and it made a lot of sense.
Yeah, ditto. Very logical. Made a lot of sense.
All right. So you're gonna have to forgive me because I'm going to be critical on you because I know you can take it.
Oh no, I actually want you to be critical on that because I've talked to every burner about that, and they got mad at me.
Yeah, actually, I was going to say that. So I think this is one of those questions that we have to be a little extra vigilant and careful about because for a lot of people, it's not just a logical argument, but also an emotional one. And a lot of the emotion comes from the fact that if you're working full time, there's a lot of people who are working 2 full-time jobs, 2.5, 3 full-time jobs. And they don't see it as right that if you're working a full-time job or even multiple full-time jobs, that you're still struggling. And that can largely be attributed to the fact that individually those jobs don't pay enough. So for them, it's not just a logical argument, but also a emotional one. And so I think I think this is one of those that it's very, very important to upfront acknowledge that you're on the same side and that you have shared values and really put the emphasis on accomplishing the same thing by different means. Because if you kind of take this angle of you're just wrong, then you might have a solid logical argument, but they'll just be closed off to it. Because like, well, if you're not going to solve my problem, I might as well, it does me no good to agree with you. Right?
Fair enough.
Yeah. So, does that make sense? Hopefully that wasn't
That
convoluted.
makes sense.
Okay, so who wants Kennedy? We've practiced on it before, so you want to like now that since you've practiced it before, you want to give it another try? Okay. Yeah. So I'm gonna ask it. And I'm gonna turn the laptop around. All right. So I'll phrase it the same way. So this basic income stuff. Why is that better than just raising the minimum wage? I mean, why don't we just pay more? Won't that do the same thing without bloating the government?
Yeah, so the reason that a UBI is more effective than a minimum wage is one, because we are currently in the fourth industrial revolution, and automation is taking away a lot of low-skilled jobs. People say a lot of the times that we'll create jobs, but most of those jobs are for higher-skilled individuals that have, more levels of education and like more time being employed. So if you apply for jobs, a lot of times it'll be you have to have a bachelor's degree and 3 years, 4 years, 10 years in whatever field you're trying to apply for. And so a lot of these entry level jobs filled with people that do need the minimum wage are going to be gone. And so you won't have a wage to raise up to. And even so, the UBI is actually a $6 wage raise for everyone in America. And so places that already have, I know Nebraska has like a $8 minimum wage or something, and so already that's up to $14. It's not 15, but it's close. Other places like California that already have a $15 minimum wage, I think there's this, I don't know what theirs is. It might be 12, but like that raises it up even higher for people there. And so it helps everyone overall, and especially people that can't work, such as people who are on disability or retired people that still need that money and they can no longer work. That will go to them, whereas a minimum wage raise wouldn't help them at all. So that's kind of the case for that.
Are there any thoughts to the freedom dividend? It employs caretakers. So that's just the only thing that you would want to say for it. But other than that, it's a great answer.
Yeah. And actually, you brought up a great point that Redshift on YouTube commented, minimum wage increases does not address millions who are not in the labor force but contribute in the shadow economies. So, dude, that's like a great answer in like 10 seconds, 15 seconds. Well, he referred to them as shadow economies. I've never heard that term before. Yeah, I mean, we might steal that phrase because I can't think of a better way to put it than just economies that are not part of the mainstream labor market. So yeah, minimum wage increase does not address the millions who are not in the labor force, but contribute in the shadow economy. I think the only reason I'm a little hesitant is shadow economy is because it sounds like black market kind of vibe, but that entire composition is really good. So yeah, and I think another thing I really liked about what Kennedy brought up was just that, the jump to 15 is much more drastic in certain parts of the country, right? Like in an urban setting, like McDonald's and Arby's, they already start at like $9, $11. So increasing that to $15 is not a huge leap. But if you're in like a rural Midwest town, that minimum wage is pretty close to $8.25, $9, and so jumping to 15 is a lot more drastic. Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna give this one a try. You want to ask it me?
All right, Hexel. So you've heard of the freedom dividend. You've heard of the $15 minimum wage. Why would you prefer the freedom dividend over the $15 minimum wage?
That's a great question. So the first thing I want to establish is that we're not against increasing the minimum wage. Andrew Yang himself has been very clear that he's in favor of raising the minimum wage because ultimately we share the same values, which is that if you're working a full-time job, it doesn't make sense for you to be living in poverty and just getting by. Now, the main part that we take issue with is setting it at the federal level, where we act as if every single business has the same level of capabilities. In fact, it would hurt if you're trying to go after the Walmarts and the McDonald's of the world that can easily pay for 15, then you're forgetting about the millions of businesses that are not McDonald's, paying them more per hour. He just cut their hours. And so I don't mean that as an attack on Bernie, but even if a rational and competent person like Bernie would cut hours, then businesses that are not raking in millions of dollars every month, they're going to have to come to the same rational decision. And so the freedom dividend would accomplish the exact same value of making sure that if you are working full time, you're not living in poverty, but it does so without putting a burden on the business, actually encouraging more businesses to start and keep going. And that's why it'll create $4 trillion. Increase GDP by $4 trillion and create 2 million new jobs, because it actually empowers businesses and empowers the employee rather than creating a struggle between the employee and the working class. So, yeah, thoughts on that?
No, you definitely.
Criticism is welcome too. I don't want to be in a bubble.
Yeah, no, I think this is just something, where we just want to see more arguments for it. I mean, I'm really open to that, and that's just really what it comes down to. I mean, I'm happy to talk to anyone that's still for it. Every time I've had this conversation with people, they've gotten really upset. So I really want to talk more about it.
Right. Yeah, I think there's a couple things I want to add to the pool of knowledge here. Is one, I would say be very careful about giving the impression that we are against minimum wage and against increasing it in any way, shape, or form, right? Because Andrew Yang himself has made it clear that he's in favor of minimum wage increasing in general. He just does not have a policy for across the board federal minimum wage, right? But so that's the first thing: is make sure you're representing what Andrew Yang actually stands for accurately. And the second thing I want to throw into the pool of knowledge, this might be something that you don't bring up, say, in your first minute of your instant response, but something to keep in mind is that other countries that have a minimum wage, other developed countries, what they do is that they don't tie it to congressional approval. What they do is they have an independent commission that tracks inflation and cost of living over time and indexes the minimum wage to that growth. Yes, and they do it regularly. And so UBI would also be indexed to poverty level and inflation. And so in the case of minimum wage, because other countries can reliably predict it, then if you're a business owner, okay, this year it's $8, next year it's $8.25, next year it's $9. So you can actually plan on that growth versus, and very reliably how much that employee is going to cost you over time. Versus in the United States, because the minimum wage is a political football, then A, you have people fighting over it all the time, causing gridlock. And then B, whether or not it happens puts business owners at unease. Because business owners are not evil. Well, they're not all evil people. There's a lot of people who start a business because they legitimately care about people. They want to create that business opportunity. And they would pay their employees more if they could. And so if you make it tied to a scale that they can predict, they can adjust accordingly. But if you make minimum wage this thing that just spikes unexpectedly according to the political climate, then that's why it's not as great for business. And so that's something to put in pool knowledge. I wish maybe we can petition Andrew Yang to make indexing of the minimum wage something. Yeah. It's currently not. Yeah. Something to think about. Like, I'm not against asking Andrew Yang to consider stuff. But that's just for context. Like, he said many times he's for raising the minimum wage. It's just not a policy item for him because there's something else that we can do that's more pragmatic, more beneficial to more people. And something I didn't say, but everyone should mention at some point is that there are, that's yang2020.com. In fact, we should make that a rule. Every time you answer, always plug yang2020.com before you jump into your answer. That's a new rule. You guys saw it here first, right? It has now been ratified by the internet. So whenever you make an answer, always plug yang2020.com before launching into your answer. But back on this minimum wage business, always make sure that you point out that the basic income will cover people who simply are not covered by employability. Because what we're trying to promote is not employability, it's work. If you're working, you should be compensated for your work. But the minimum wage places employability on a pedestal. Whereas if you're a caretaker, or if you're a mom, or if you're a student, that's work. That's legitimate work. Nonprofit is legitimate work. But minimum wage does not value that form of work. So, all right. So I want to move on from minimum wage. Let's cover a couple more questions. So, I kind of want let's save that one because we did that one before. But I want to do something related to climate and related to education, since that's what stuff we talked about in the first half. So the question I want to ask is, what is Yang going to do about the climate, and why is he better? It's a tricky one, right? Yeah. Who wants to take that one first? You want to take that one? Okay. So, Laura, could you ask her this question? Ask her, what is Yang's climate plan, and why is he better than the other candidates?
To the other nominees.
Well, you asked, what is Yang going to do for climate change? But the real question is, what is he going to do for climate change? Because this man is crazy with his climate change policies. If you go to his site, Yang2020, see that like he has 10 that are just about different things he's going to do. He's going to invest in clean energy, not just nuclear, but also solar and wind. Also in techniques like carbon capture from the atmosphere. There's like a bunch of other ones that again are on his sites, are on his site. He's investing in like geoengineering practices that will enhance the ways that we handle climate change. China is investing a lot in Africa in their energy source, but they're giving them the Chinese are giving like African countries power sources that are very like dirty for the environment. And so that's one thing that Yang wants to combat is he wants to go into these African countries and say, hey, this is really hurting our planet. We in America are willing to help invest in your power structures and give you clean energy. To kind of cut down on China's investing in Africa, like transportation, housing, building new buildings in America that are all much cleaner and greener ways to sustain our limit. He supports the Green New Deal and the committee that will come along with it. And there's several future policies he has. He has a whole, I think it's like a 20-year plan to get us down to zero emissions by 2030, and plenty of other different climate change plans. So,
Wait. But my follow-up question is, how is he different from other candidates?
He's different from other candidates because he has more tangible plans that are laid out to the public. Elizabeth Warren's big thing is if anyone has a problem, she says, I have a plan for that. But where are her plans? And she doesn't tackle the issue in depth as much as Andrew Yang, and none of the candidates do. The only one who did have a climate change plan that was as in depth as Andrew Yang's was Jay Inslee, who unfortunately is no longer in the race. Most of the other politicians are concerned with things like free healthcare, free college. Kamala Harris, I think, is like crime. Justice, like solving the injustice in America. But Andrew Yang is the only one that can do all of that and climate change in depth and with plenty of good policies.
Yeah, it sounds like he has an adaptive.
We're gonna clip that. We're gonna make clips out of this. Yeah. WS Federation. Go Andrew Yang. Yay. Yeah. So that was a really good answer. There's a lot of things I like about it. I think that the way you contrasted Andrew Yang's platform with others is really good, and then making it clear that like having a climate plan at all in detail is not that common. And then your answer to the first part, which was just laying out all the things he's going to do. Because I've talked about this before, but for better or for worse, a lot of times when people ask questions, this is kind of a hack, a life hack or a secret. Most people, when they ask questions, they don't actually care about the answer. I've talked about this before. What they really care about is to know, is there an answer? And is that answer so integral to the campaign that if they ask an average supporter, they would know about it, right? I'll give you an example. Like the freedom dividend's pretty central to Andrew's campaign. So any of us can describe what the freedom dividend is at the drop of a hat, right? At the drop of a math hat. But so they'll ask other things like, what's his stance on climate change, or what's his stance on this, what's his stance on that? And a lot of the times, like the really important thing is that you have a solid answer ready to go, because as long as you can answer, then they know, okay, this is something that is important to campaign. It's clearly is important and communicated to his supporters. So the fact that you were able to actually articulate what he's going to do is a big thing. I think the one feedback I would have is a couple things. One, probably focus in on like maybe one big thing instead of the spaghetti. So that way it has a bigger impact as opposed to each point diluting each other. That said, like I would say like for your first minute of answer, right? Focus on one thing. And then if they want to engage more, then you pull out the textbook on them and kind of list. And then the second thing, oh, which command, good job getting yang2020.com in the beginning of your answer. And then I would say when it's climate change, plug yangsclimateplan.com.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah,
Oh,
because you go yangclimateplan.com takes you directly to the policy plan. No fiddling around with the website, no clicking through. Yangclimateplan.com. So yeah, just the two things. So yangclimateplan.com, whoever came, yangclimateplan.com. All right, so who wants to ask me the question? Okay.
So, sir, what is Andrew Yang doing to combat climate change, and how is his position superior to any of the other candidates?
Thanks, Kennedy. So I'm going to try to answer both of those questions at the same time. So Andrew Yang takes what we call the third position on climate change. Traditionally, politicians talk about only two. One is that climate change is an existential threat and it's real. The second position is climate change is a hoax. We don't need to do anything about it. And the third position is we're 10 years too late. We have to act as if the robber's not at the door, but inside the house. And so that's why when you look at yangclimateplan.com, you can find a huge laundry list of things we're going to do, including nuclear, including carbon capture, including investing in communities to allow them to move to higher ground. And that's not just figurative, that's literally moving people. It's called planned retreat. And so, because we're already spending tens of billions of dollars to shore up and mitigate the rising sea level, but if we don't do that now, if we don't make the investment, it'll cost us hundreds of billions of dollars later, and it'll cost tens of thousands of lives. So that's why we have to act now as if the rubber's not at the door, but inside the house. And that's why we have to acknowledge that we're 10 years too late. And I want to contrast what this third position means in a very real way by comparing it to some other candidates' positions. Most politicians, like, for example, Bernie Sanders, doesn't have a plan that behaves like this is a crisis happening right now. For example, Andrew Yang is support of nuclear, which 60%, the majority of the climate change community supports. But Bernie Sanders does not support nuclear. He wants to take his time to find something better. And unfortunately, that's not a luxury that we have. You can't shop for the security system while the robber's in the house. And that's why Andrew Yang's climate plan at yangclimateplan.com is superior to all the others because he acts with urgency. He has all the options on the table, and his plan reflects that. Okay, that was my answer.
I thought that was great. Good job plugging the website again. I think I don't know, some people get very uppity about nuclear and it's kind of a hot point. And so I think it helps to be like nuclear and solar and wind. So people know that he's like investing in other things too. But that was my one.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. So like, and I'll let you talk in a second. I'll let you talk in a second when I'm done. I'm gonna let you finish now. But yeah, so I mean, Kenny actually brought a good point. It's something to be kind of tiptoe around, to be careful, because right now it's 60-40. 60% of people support nuclear, 40% don't, and even though that means that the majority, that still means that there's a significant chunk of people who would be offended or take nuclear as a negative. And so if we are going to use it as a talking point, definitely cushion it with the fact that he does include solar, he does include carbon capture, he does include planned retreat. WS Federation said many Pacific islands, including Kiribati, are disappearing. Indonesia is moving their capital city. Yeah, and so that's a great point. Like, we can act as if we can act now and prevent that, or we can say this is already happening and we need to make the investments to help people survive. Because, like I said, it's 10 years. That's the third position. This is not something that's coming. It's something that's already here. So great points. And thank you for commenting on the YouTube. All right, does anyone want to do that one? Oh,
The burglar already being there, because that helps make it more real. And I think that's part of the problem with climate change is it seems so esoteric and big and not real. And so that helps put it into more urgent, visceral context.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'll tell you where I got that talking point from. Is actually I got that talking point from Steve Marchant, the guy who ran for governor of New Hampshire and has helped influence the Yang's climate plan. He gave an interview with Nerds for Yang where he used that analogy of what you do when the robber's at the door or is coming is different from what you do when the robber's already in your house. You can't shop around and take your time to pick an alarm system when the robber's already stealing your stuff and putting your family in danger. So, yeah. Okay. Does anyone want to do?
I was going to comment on it. So the
Did
only
I ever get back to you after I stonewalled you?
it's all right, Kanye. We're good. So the only thing I'm going to say is when you talk about nuclear, there's two types of nuclear. There's uranium. That is the bad nuclear that they're talking about. Uranium is the one that you build nuclear weapons. That's the one in North Korea. When Yang mentions nuclear, he's talking about thorium. And anyone that talks about renewable energy and you're talking about nuclear, they're actually referring to thorium as the source. So do I know everything about it? No. I mean, that's something I definitely need to research more, but you can find out more on yangsclimateplan.com.
Yeah. Great plug. So you go to yangsclimateplan.com and you'll see the breakdown of how he spends his money. And a big chunk of that $4 trillion is not just in things that we already know how to do, but also in researching new technologies. For example, you may notice that he says new nuclear reactors in place by 2027, right? And part of that is because he is not ignorant of the fact that a lot of these technologies are not ready yet or are still brand new. And so that's why he spends hundreds of billions of dollars in research and development, not just saying, okay, what works now, that's what we're stuck with. Again, it's looking at every option on the table, like across the board. Things we know how to do, things we don't know how to do, and things that we have to do because that's the only thing that will practically work, like thorium, nuclear reactors. But then again, as we're explaining to other people, we have to be careful about how something like nuclear, again, it's a 60-40 split. And so you kind of have to couch it in the fact that that's not the only thing he's relying on. And then also make efforts to dispel the misconception that he is somehow defeatist by saying we're 10 years late. When you say you're 10 years late, you can either say you're a defeatist or you're radical in your approach, right? Because if you're too late, either you can do nothing or you can have to do extra. And we're definitely in the latter. So, all right, let's get one more workshop question in, and then we'll let our one watcher go home. Nuclear provides the fastest way to get off fossil fuel grid power. Using thorium to breed uranium-233 fuel is much safer than directly using solid uranium-235. I don't know who you are, WS Federation Identity, but thank you. I mean, for what it's worth, like, we are mainly going off of what the website says. So we're not, full disclosure, we're not chemists. Like Kennedy says, she's not a lawyer. She's just a legal worker. She's going to be, but she can't legally say that she's a lawyer. So, so thank you. All right, so we're going to pick our last question. Do we want to do it about climate change, or do we want to do it about the last topic we did, which was controlling the cost of higher education?
Education was what you wanted to do.
Yeah, so let's round it out by covering the last topic we talked about in part 1. So the question's going to be, well, let's make the question itself simple. What's Andrew Yang going to do about education? Because plug, this was a big issue after the last night's debate. I saw some articles saying like Andrew Yang's this private school Trojan horse, like he's against public education. That's not true, but it is something that people think, and I think one thing we want to learn is how to combat those misconceptions. So, we want to do it? Take this one?
I don't think I can answer the
You don't-
charter school question. I can answer.
I mean, you don't have to address charter school. You can have an answer whatever you want. I just was kind of throwing it out there that those are some of the misconceptions we need to address. eventually. Like, well, but you can answer however you want. So you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. So this Andrew guy, what's he gonna do about education?
Well, there's different. We look at different forms of education. So let's start with universal pre-K. He's always been for universal pre-K. When you're learning skills in high school, he's talking about life skills education, and even offering free financial education. Those sources right there just help kids in general prepare for the real world. And then when it comes to college, he's saying if you want government assistance, you need to break open the books and tell us why you need so much. Tell us why you need so much funding from the government. So when it comes to education, there's improving the education for the real world situations, and also asking where are you spending the public funds.
Awesome. How do you feel about that answer, Laura? So I saw you look up. Didn't know that meant you were, yeah. But I like you're touching on, like, asking them to break open the books and kind of, because one of the things that Andrew Yang wants to do is basically we covered this in part one, but reduce the cost of education by removing administrative bloat. Well, I definitely recommend like looking at like in his book and on his website what he says about colleges, and how a lot of them are basically endowment funds with a school attached to it, right? Where they have more money spent on administrators of these funds as opposed to actual teachers. And then I'm going to have Kennedy answer this question as well, because she led our first half talking about the talking points around education. The question, she just came back from the restroom, the question was, what is Andrew going to do about education? Oh, did you plug yang2020.com?
I did not.
1 point off. So I'm going to turn this question now to Kennedy. So Kennedy, what is Andrew Yang going to do about education?
Wait, like all education or like higher education?
Yeah, I mean, that's a question people might ask. So
Okay.
take whatever angle you want. The question is the question, but you can answer it however you want.
The charter school question.
Yeah. That charter school question is a hard one. Okay. One thing that Andrew Yang is going to do that a lot of people are currently doing is he's going to push vocational training. A lot of kids, I just graduated high school in May of 2018. And when I was in high school, it was a lot of like, you have to go get a bachelor's degree. You have to go to a 4-year university. And no one told me that I could have gotten a 2-year degree and had been making like good money, a few years after I had gotten the degree, and spent way less on tuition. So he's gonna, I don't know how, actually. I'm very sorry. I need to look at his policies. I only looked at the policy, but he does want to kind of invest in vocational training, to my understanding, and show kids that like you can get other degrees that aren't just a 4-year degree. As for higher education, Yang actually has a great plan. The cost of education has increased by 440% since the boomer generation, and the quality of education hasn't really gone up. We're still learning the same things from the same old textbooks, and we're still getting the same degrees. So the other thing with higher education is that it's like right now administrators to student ratio is like 20 administrators to 1 student, which is really like a high amount of administrators. In the boomer generation, it was 50 administrators to 1 student, and so Yang plans to bring it back up. His desired ratio is 30 to 1, but again, with implementing vocational training and kind of pushing that more, it could get back up to that 50 to 1. And that's where a lot of the money is going. And so I spend way too much on tuition, and I see it go to like head of parking office or, like another fountain on campus. And that's not really where I want my money to be going. And so part of the way that he'll also fight that is changing the rankings to more reflect like what schools are actually doing. Sorry, this is a very long answer, but I just learned a lot about it. So like there are colleges that will say 99% of our grads got a job right after graduating. And what they'll do is they'll pair up with a company that hire their graduates for 6 months to a year. Maybe it's even part-time work, and then fire them like as soon as they're done with them. So yeah, they got a job, but it's not the field they wanted. It's not the job they wanted, and it's not what they needed at the time. And so Andrew Yang wants to meet with those colleges and have those colleges meet with their alumni and see what their job prospects are 10 years after graduating, so that there's not fake news ratings in the U.S. World News or U.S. college rankings, because that's kind of rampant. And especially it was hard when I was looking for colleges to figure out what it all meant. So that's the shortest way I can put all that. Sorry.
Oh, that's great.
Awesome. That's great. I mean, that could be a video on itself.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think you have a good soundbite for that. That's a great answer in general. Like it's just so that should be a soundbite. If anyone needs an answer on education, I mean, I'm not a student anymore. I was, but I can tell you that my education that I have, that I've paid off my student loan, definitely doesn't reflect the job that I have. I can tell you that right now. And I actually go to her school. Went to her school. I'm an alum, and I can tell you that the administration work, how much the tuition has gone up. It's not reflective of the quality of education that she's receiving.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I have a couple. Well, in addition to all the great stuff he said, positive and then a suggestion. So the positive is I really like that you invoked your personal experience, because that personal experience always hits heavier than anything else. If you can talk where you're, from what you actually know, then that makes you an authority on what you're saying. I think the only other thing is, yeah, definitely I recommend finding a way to make it more concise and shorter. I mean, you acknowledge that, and so that might mean trying to find a few words to communicate big ideas, and that might also mean prioritizing what are the key things you want to touch on versus trying to cover everything. But yeah, I love that you demonstrated a awareness and knowledge in terms of multiple things he's going to do, and so whatever you do prioritize, you definitely want to hang on to what you cut out of your initial answer, so that if you have a prolonged conversation about it, you can go into more detail. Okay.
Be concise with his policies.
Yeah, it's hard to be concise with Andrew Yang. You definitely have to spend time thinking about how do I boil this down. So, okay, I think I'm going to give this one a shot. Want to sort of question to me?
Hexel.
Yeah.
What is Andrew Yang's plan with dealing with the quality of education and controlling cost?
Yeah, so I think the best way to answer this is quote Andrew Yang himself. He's pro good school. So if you go to yang2020.com, you'll find policies on how to lower the cost of higher education, increasing teacher salaries, and also to promote non-traditional forms of education, because we place a lot of emphasis on college, but there's also trade schools, there's also vocational training. And so if we can make education more accessible across the board, then more people will be prepared for the next 12 years of jobs being automated away. And so one of the key, I think the key tenets are controlling the cost of higher education, raising teacher salaries, and in promoting other forms of education like vocational and job training, because vocational and job training have a high rate of success, and they also have a high rate of resiliency to changes in the job market, like automation, globalization, and there's a shortage of trade workers. So those are all things like, much like his climate change plan, he has an all across the board buffet, if you will, but all of them culminate into making sure that our kids get the highest education possible. Yeah, WS Federation Identity said vocational schools are a much more effective way to learn a real skill and get a job right away, get you started in life with a solid foundation. Yeah, that's an excellent point. And great, I'm really glad you're on this live stream. And I think an also good point is that, most politicians are only talking about college, but if you're going to prioritize automation, college is not the most effective for a 50-year-old truck driver who previously only had a high school education. And so if you have someone who went through a government retraining program, who are you going to more likely hire? A early 20s, young, fresh college grad, or a 50-year-old college grad who spent the last 30 years truck driving and went through a government-sponsored, retraining. So you're probably going to hire the younger person because they're fresher, they have less health problems. So yeah.
feel you, W. I feel you on that. Like, I mean, I say the same thing. I
Oh,
mean,
What did
when-
he say? You have to.
he said I pissed away 4 years of college. Should have just went to a coding school. And to be honest with you, WS, I mean, I learned coding on the job, and honestly, though, that little bit of coding that I learned is way more valuable than my 4 years of college. So I agree with you on that.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the other thing that I've experienced in college is I'm getting a finance degree, and a lot of the classes I take that are like, oh, accounting, it's just bookkeeping that can be automated so easily. And so a lot of people think like automation, that's like a blue collar job. Like my dad is an airplane mechanic, and like that can be automated. But he doesn't think that a finance degree can be automated away. And I have to call him and be like, Dad, I like this. I might need to switch my major to something that can't be automated. Even like the computer science majors that I've talked to have been like, yeah, AI might get so good that it can automate itself. And so, yeah, that kind of goes back to we need to control higher education costs and put vocational.
Yeah, to go along with more examples of white collar jobs that can be automated away, it also includes in the medical field radiology and pathology, as much as the doctors don't want to admit that. Artificial intelligence in being able to detect contrast faster and diagnose faster. It's happening.
Yeah, I'm a legal assistant, and my job could easily be automated. I hope my boss is not watching this, but he really could just get software right now and fire me if he wanted to. That could do the job just as good as I can. So
Awesome. I think there's so much that can be said about education. But I definitely recommend for anyone watching, go to yang2020.com, look at his education policies, and they speak for themselves. And so we're getting close to our second hour mark, so I want to wrap this up. So I'm going to plug a last few things. Number one, we do this every week, actually, every other Sunday and every Tuesday in between, because we do want to open the door for people to participate if they can't make it on a Sunday or make it on a Tuesday, because people have different work schedules. So number two, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter as DFW for Yang. That's DFW, so Dallas Fort Worth. DFW for the word for, and Yang. And that'll show you all the events that are happening in the Metroplex. We literally have 6 events a week, and so there's a lot of opportunities to get involved. YangClimatePlan.com is a website we purchased so that it can go straight to his plan. And if you live in Dallas Fort Worth, please get with us. Send us a message saying you're coming or you want to help with the climate strike this Friday at 7 p.m. We have a golden opportunity to make a big noise by having a big turnout at something that I would bet no other presidential candidate is going to be present at. We have a chance to do that. And so you can visit our website, DallasYangGang.com. You can donate to the campaign to DallasYangGang.com/donate. That goes directly to the campaign. It doesn't go to us. But if you go to DallasYangGang.com/donate, it gives us like points, if you will. Like it tracks how much Dallas Yang Gang is producing. So DallasYangGang.com/donate. And yeah, next time we do this, we'll be a lot more produced. Tony, any final words?
I just want to say that everything that is in Dallas right now, we're all volunteers. We're not paid on the national campaign. The reason why that's important is because there's a big group of us. It just shows that there's a lot of energy, and and we do listen to other sides. We actually have a lot of supporters that come to our events, and we speak to them. They come. I mean, it's not like an agree or disagree. They just come to listen because they're curious about it. So if you are in the area or you just want to speak to us about policies in general, we're more than willing to speak to you about it. But I mean, I just like to say, visit us, DFW for Yang, Dallas Yang Gang. We're on all social media. We all manage it. We all volunteer to do it. Again, though, we're not getting paid to do this at all. The national is not paying us to do this. We really, truly believe in our candidate. Yang2020.com. Yang Climate Plan.
Yeah, just what they said. We have lots of events. We're a pretty fun crowd, I like to think. There's a lot of information on Facebook, but also I'm sure if you wanted to get information from this YouTube channel, I'm sure there's a way to ask questions. But yeah, we're all fun. I believe in Andrew Yang. I believe that he can win. Yeah, that's the. Would you like to say anything?
Ditto.
All right, everyone. Well, thank you to everyone for tuning in. The fact that we have 4 people watching right now is very. We had 6. Wow, 6 people. Thank you for hosting this event. I think it's great. You're in public space. It gets exposure. Yes, thank you.
We love your input.
So we are going to do this again next week. We are going to be more produced next time. We'll get the omnidirectional microphone, and we'll get a webcam that we can move around rather than doing this laptop business. And we might also do it simultaneously with Facebook Live so we can get more eyeballs. Definitely tell your friends to tune in next time. I would promise we'll be more concise and more prepared. Bring your questions, bring your comments. If you want something for us to cover next time, send us a message. Our email is dallas4yang@gmail.com. And yeah, all right, guys. Thanks a bunch. Yang2020.com.
That was fun.
It was.